everything, even inside the air-conditioned confines of Ginny O'Malley's office. The Ray Jenkins case, though formally closed, still echoed in the hallways, a grim testament to her intuition. Now, the stacks of new cold case files, carefully categorized by severity and potential solvability, seemed to lean precariously on her desk. Finn, ever watchful, was curled tightly on his mat, his breathing even. "Another one for the wizard, huh?" Detective Miller, the FBI data analyst who had stayed on with the LRPD's cold case unit after the Jenkins investigation, leaned against Ginny's doorframe holding a thick, faded file. "This one's got a particular flavor of unsolvable that might just be up your alley." Ginny looked up, a familiar weariness etched around her eyes, but also a spark of the relentless curiosity that drove her. "Lay it on me, Miller. What fresh hell awaits?" "The disappearance of Sarah Beth Monroe, Pine Bluff, 1998, Miller stated, placing the file on her desk. Pine Bluff was a city about an hour south of Little Rock, a mix of industrial riverfront and quiet residential areas. Sarah Beth was 17. Talented musician, a singer, played half a dozen instruments, star pupil at the local arts high school, heading for a scholarship to Berkeley, or so everyone said. Vanished without a trace after a late-night band practice. Ginny opened the file. The initial photo was a vibrant headshot of a young woman with a cascade of fiery red hair and eyes that sparkled with ambition and joy, a stark contrast to the grainy, shadowed photos of the Ray Jenkins victims. "Trouble at the band practice location?" Ginny asked, already scanning the initial reports, looking for the tiny discrepancies, the almost missed details. "Clean." Her bandmates left before her. She was packing up her guitar, doors locked behind them. She was supposed to walk 2 blocks home. Never made it. Miller tapped the file. The only thing unusual? Her guitar pick, a custom one she always used, was found outside the practice space, near the back alley, partially buried in some leaves. Her bandmates swore she never left it anywhere. It was like a second skin. Ginny's gaze sharpened, her fingers brushing the faded photograph of the missing girl. A specific sentimental item found near the scene, but no other trace. It echoed faintly the trophy-taking of Jenkins, yet the core modus operandi was wildly different. Disappearance, not murder. No other victims linked. This wasn't a serial killer's signature. This was something else. A guitar pick, Ginny mused aloud. Not a body, but a piece of her. Left behind, her mind, honed by years of sifting through the debris of trauma, began to whir. And what about Sarah Beth herself? Any psychological profile? Any hidden lives? Any secrets the good parents might not have wanted known? Miller shrugged. Clean as a whistle, according to the original detectives. A golden child. But that's why it's unsolvable, right? Too perfect, too clean, no logical reason for her to vanish. Ginny looked at the file, then down at Finn, who had lifted his head, his intelligent eyes fixed on her. The absence of a body meant a different kind of horror, a perpetual limbo for the family. But the found item, the single sentimental clue, spoke to her in a way that others might dismiss. It was a whisper in the silence. Sarah Beth Monroe, Ginny said, the name rolling off her tongue, already taking root in her mind. Let's see if we can find her melody. Ginny's initial deep dive into Sarah Beth Monroe's case was methodical, bordering on obsessive. She didn't just read the police reports, she absorbed them, looking for the human story beneath the dry language of official documents. Finn, sensing her focus, lay quietly at her feet, occasionally nudging her hand with his nose, a grounding presence in the swirling vortex of details. The reports painted a picture of a baffling disappearance. Sarah Beth, by all accounts, was an exceptional student, a gifted musician, and deeply devoted to her family. No history of rebellion, drug use, or secret boyfriends. The original investigation had been thorough, the notes meticulously detailed, yet every lead had dead-ended. Divers had searched the Arkansas River, cadaver dogs had scoured miles of woodlands, and every known associate had been interviewed repeatedly. The only physical evidence remained that single custom guitar pick found discarded in the alley outside the band practice room. Ginny focused on the hours leading up to the disappearance. Sarah Beth had been at band practice with 2 friends, Mark and Lily, until approximately 10:30 p.m. They confirmed she was the last to leave, packing up her guitar. She lived just 2 blocks away, a route she knew well and walked frequently. The lack of any struggle, any dropped items, any sign of forced abduction along that short walk was profoundly unsettling. It suggested either a highly professional abductor or someone Sarah Beth knew and trusted. Ginny pulled up old photos of the neighborhood from that era. Quiet, tree-lined streets. Few security cameras existed in residential areas in 1998. Streetlights offered patches of illumination, but shadows would have been plentiful. She noted the subtle differences between the current satellite images and the historical ones, looking for changed landscaping, new fences, anything that might alter a sightline or provide cover. Her hypervigilance, honed by years of trauma, picked up on subtle nuances in the witness statements. Mark described Sarah Beth as excited about her upcoming scholarship, while Lily mentioned her being a little stressed about a new song they were writing. Minor details, perhaps, but Ginny's mind flagged them. Excitement and stress, normal emotions, but sometimes extremes of normal could open unexpected doors. She then shifted to Sarah Beth's personal life, poring over school records, yearbooks, and old community flyers. She found dozens of mentions of Sarah Beth's musical performances, her awards, her participation in church events. There was even a faded photo of her playing guitar at a local talent show, wearing a distinctive silver ring shaped like a treble clef. The report made no mention of this ring being found or missing. Another detail to flag. This golden child narrative Ginny mused aloud to Finn, who blinked up at her, always makes me wonder what else was there. No one is entirely clean as a whistle at 17, meeting the Monroe family and close friends. Equipped with her initial observations and a list of targeted questions, Ginny scheduled a meeting with Sarah Beth's surviving family, her parents, Eleanor and Robert Monroe, and her two closest friends from the band, Mark and Lily, now in their early 40s. The meeting was arranged at the Monroe's home in Pine Bluff, a decision Ginny preferred as it often unlocked deeper, more personal memories. The Monroe home was immaculate, filled with photographs of Sarah Beth at every stage of her life, a shrine to a vibrant past frozen in time. Eleanor, a woman whose eyes held a perpetual sadness, greeted Ginny with a cautious hope. Robert, stoic and quiet, offered a firm handshake. Mark and Lily arrived shortly after, their faces etched with the weariness of decades of unanswered questions. Finn settled calmly beside Ginny's chair, sensing the delicate emotional landscape. "Thank you for seeing me," Ginny began, her voice gentle. "I know this brings everything back, but sometimes a fresh perspective can uncover what was missed." She spent the first hour listening, letting them share their memories of Sarah Beth, not just the facts of the disappearance. They spoke of her dreams, her quirky sense of humor, her passion for music. The raw grief, though dulled by time, was still profoundly present. Then Ginny began to ask her targeted questions. "You mentioned Sarah Beth was excited about her scholarship, Mark," Ginny said. "But Lily, you said she was also a little stressed about a new song. Can you tell me more about that?" Lily hesitated. "It was just a demanding piece. She was trying something new, pushing her boundaries. It was for a composition competition. She really wanted it to be perfect. Did this stress cause any arguments, any friction with anyone?" Ginny probed. Mark interjected, "No, not really. Sarah Beth was a perfectionist, but she never took it out on us. Maybe a little frustrated with herself sometimes." Ginny then turned to Eleanor and Robert. "The initial reports didn't mention it, but I noticed in some older photos, Sarah Beth wore a silver treble clef ring. Was that important to her?" Eleanor's hand went to her throat, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh, yes! It was a gift from her grandmother. She never took it off. Never. It had sentimental value. We told the police everything we could think of, but it was so long ago. I don't remember if we specifically mentioned the ring or if they just didn't see it as important." Ginny made a note. A small sentimental item like the guitar pick possibly missing. Not valuable, but personal. The familiar prickle of intuition began to stir. "And her music," Ginny continued, looking at each of them. "Did Sarah Beth have any secret notebooks? Any private journals with song lyrics or compositions that perhaps she didn't share with everyone?" She watched their faces closely, not just their words. A flicker of something crossed Lily's face before she responded. "Not that I know of. She was pretty open about her music." Mark nodded in agreement. Ginny thanked them for their time, promising to be in touch. As she and Finn walked out, Ginny knew the case was far from clean as a whistle. The quiet perfection they all described felt like a carefully constructed facade. or perhaps a blind spot. The missing ring, the discarded pick, the vague stress about a song. These were the dissonant notes in Sarah Beth's vanishing melody, and Ginny intended to find out why. The silver treble clef ring and the custom guitar pick were not just missing items. For Ginny, they were the silent witnesses to Sarah Beth Monroe's last known moments, whispering a story that the official reports had overlooked. She felt a familiar prickle of intuition. These weren't just random lost objects. Ginny returned to the initial crime scene photos, specifically the alleyway where the guitar pick was found. She zoomed in, pixel by pixel, on the area around the pick. The pick itself was a vibrant blue, with a small, stylized hummingbird etched into its surface, a detail her bandmates had confirmed was unique to Sarah Beth. Ginny noticed it was partially buried in a small pile of leaves and dirt, almost as if it had been dropped and then subtly, perhaps unintentionally, kicked or scuffed over. It hadn't been neatly placed. For next, Ginny focused on the silver treble clef ring. Eleanor Monroe's reaction had been particularly telling. She never took it off, This wasn't just jewelry, it was an extension of Sarah Beth's identity as a musician, a constant, tangible link to her passion and her grandmother. The fact that it was missing and not found at the scene or in her home was a crucial clue. A struggle? If a struggle occurred, the ring could have been forcibly removed or fallen off, but there was no other evidence of a struggle taken by the perpetrator. If it was a trophy, it hinted at a motive beyond simple abduction. But Ray Jenkins's MO was entirely different. Sarah Beth's parents were unharmed, given willingly, unlikely in an abduction scenario. Given as a token, could she have given it to someone she trusted, perhaps in a moment of duress or a desperate attempt to leave a clue? Ginny started mapping possible scenarios based on the pick and the ring. One sudden encounter, brief struggle. Sarah Beth is walking home. She encounters someone. The pick drops due to surprise or a quick movement. The ring either falls off during a very brief, contained struggle, or it is removed by the perpetrator. A known abductor, trust betrayed. Sarah Beth knows the person. She's packing up. The pick slips from her hand in a moment of distraction or surprise as the person approaches. The ring is later removed by the abductor, perhaps a keepsake, or she removes it herself and gives it as a desperate plea or clue. This scenario explained the lack of obvious struggle. A meeting gone wrong. Sarah Beth was meeting someone. The pick drops as she greets them or turns to leave. The ring's absence could be related to the nature of this meeting. The scattered pick, the missing ring, these weren't just lost items. They were fragmented pieces of communication. The pick suggested a moment of action or surprise outside the practice room, perhaps just as she exited or was about to. The ring, so personal and consistently worn, hinted at a deeper, more intentional act of removal, either by force or by Sarah Beth herself. Ginny decided to re-interview Lily and Mark, not about Sarah Beth's habits, but about the alley itself. Was it commonly used? Who else would have been there late at night? Did anyone else ever go through that back area after band practice? She also wanted to specifically ask them if they had ever seen Sarah Beth take off her ring for any reason, no matter how trivial. These small, seemingly insignificant actions could hold the key to understanding the silent story the pick and ring were trying to tell her. Ginny arranged another meeting with Mark and Lily, this time specifically at the old high school's band practice room in Pine Bluff. She wanted to walk the ground, to see the alley for herself through their eyes. The high school, though older, still echoed with the sounds of student life. The band room was now used by the drama club, but the layout was the same. Ginny led Mark and Lily to the back door, the one Sarah Beth would have exited. The alley was narrow, a paved path between the school building and a chain-link fence bordering a neglected patch of woods. It was shadowed, even in the daytime, by overgrown trees and the bulk of the school building. "Okay," Ginny began, her voice calm as she pointed to the general area where the pick was found. "Sarah Beth leaves the store, walks 2 blocks home. Tell me again about that night. Was this alley ever a shortcut? Did anyone else use it?" Mark scuffed his shoe on the pavement. "Sometimes we'd cut through if we were going to the convenience store on the next street over, but not usually if you were just heading straight home. It was darker and there wasn't really a reason." Lily shivered slightly. It always felt a little creepy back here, to be honest. But Sarah Beth wasn't scared of anything. Did you ever see anyone loitering back here? Ginny pressed. Anyone unusual or even just regular people who might have seen her leave? They both shook their heads. Never saw anyone after hours, Mark confirmed. And during the day, maybe a few smokers, but that's it. Ginny then shifted to the ring. Lily, Mark, you both said Sarah Beth never took off that treble clef ring. Not for practice, not for anything. Did you ever at any point see her take it off or even think about taking it off? Her electric, she just put tape over it so it didn't scratch the guitar. Lily hesitated, then bit her lip. Well, once, maybe a few months before, she was showing us this crazy chord progression she'd figured out for the new song. Her fingers were flying. She stopped, frustrated, and actually pulled it off for a second, said it was getting in the way of her genius. She laughed, put it right back on. Lily gestured with her hands, mimicking a rapid chord change. It was just for a second. Never saw her do it again. Ginny's attention sharpened. The new song, she repeated. You mentioned Sarah Beth was stressed about it, Lily. And you, Mark, said she was pushing her boundaries. Tell me everything about the song. What made it so essential, so stressful? Was it just the technical difficulty? Lily exchanged a glance with Mark. It wasn't just the notes, Detective O'Malley, Lily said, her voice dropping. Sarah Beth was writing it for a big statewide composition competition, but it was different, more personal. She called it The Silence After. It wasn't about a breakup or anything like that. It was about secrets, things left unsaid, things that hurt. Mark added, yeah, it was heavy. Musically, it was complex, but the lyrics were even more. She'd get really intense when she was working on it, like it was pulling something out of her. Did the song relate to anything specific in her life? Ginny probed, sensing a breakthrough. Any secrets, any hidden difficulties that she might have been exploring through her music, but not talking about directly? Lily twisted her hands. We just thought it was her being artistic. She was always deep, but sometimes when she'd play a certain part or sing a particular line, she'd get this look in her eyes, like she was seeing something far away, and she'd go quiet for a long time after, more quiet than Sarah Beth usually got. Did she ever share any of those secrets with you or anyone else? Ginny asked. Mark shook his head. Sarah Beth was private about some stuff, especially her songwriting. Said it was her way of working through things. The details solidified Ginny's growing suspicion. The alley, the scattered pick, the missing ring, and now The Silence After song, a deeply personal composition about secrets and unspoken hurts. The scenario of a simple, random abduction felt increasingly unlikely. Sarah Beth wasn't just a victim of circumstance, she might have been a victim of her own truth, a truth she was trying to express through her music, perhaps to someone who didn't want it revealed. The missing ring, in this context, felt less like a trophy and more like a desperate, possibly symbolic act. Ginny knew that The Silence After was more than just a song. It was Sarah Beth's confessional, a hidden narrative. Her first priority was to find any trace of it. Lily, Mark, Ginny asked them during their last meeting, do you remember any of the lyrics to The Silence After? Did Sarah Beth ever record a demo of it or write down the full composition? Lily bit her lip. She never finished the full recording. It was still a work in progress for the competition, and she was really private about the lyrics until they were perfect. She'd hum parts or play sections, but the full words, no. She had a small, beat-up notebook she always wrote in with all her songs. She called it her song journal. Mark nodded. Yeah, that journal was sacred to her. She even kept it separate from her school notebooks. Always with her, Ginny felt a surge of cold dread. Was this song journal found among her belongings after she disappeared? Both friends shook their heads. Eleanor Monroe, who had been listening from the living room, entered the room, her face pale. No, Detective, we looked everywhere. We told the police. It wasn't in her backpack. It wasn't in her room. We just assumed it vanished with her. Maybe she had it with her when she left for practice. This was a critical piece of information. Not just the physical evidence, but her most personal, secretive thoughts, the very secrets Lily had mentioned, had also vanished. It strongly suggested a targeted abduction linked to the content of her music. The hunt for The Silence After. Ginny knew the song journal was a vital key. If Sarah Beth was exploring deep, unsettling secrets through her music, that journal would contain the raw, unfiltered truth. Its disappearance alongside Sarah Beth wasn't coincidental. First, Ginny asked Eleanor and Robert Monroe if they remembered any specific details about the journal, its size, color, or any unique features. Eleanor recalled it was a small, spiral-bound notebook, dark blue or green, well-worn from constant use. Next, Ginny decided to try a broader approach, looking for any public-facing information about the competition or the song that might exist from that time. The search for Sarah Beth Monroe, the Silence After song lyrics, did not yield any direct results for lyrics or recordings, which isn't surprising given it was 1998 and likely an unfinished, unreleased composition. The other searches provided general information about Berklee scholarships and a 1998 Berklee convocation, but nothing specific to Sarah Beth or her music competition submission. This means the song journal is even more critical. Since it vanished with her, it's highly likely it contained the secrets that potentially led to her disappearance. The next logical step is to delve into who would want those secrets silenced and how they might have known about the song's content or the journal's existence. Given the context, the most likely candidates would be people close to Sarah Beth who might have been privy to personal information she was exploring in her music. This could include family, friends, or even someone she trusted who might have seen or heard parts of the song's evolving lyrics. The online search for the Silence After yielded no concrete results for lyrics or recordings, confirming Lily and Mark's statements that the song was unfinished in private. This made the missing song journal even more critical. It wasn't just Sarah Beth's creative outlet, it was almost certainly the repository of the secrets that might have led to her disappearance. Ginny theorized that if someone wanted to silence Sarah Beth's truth, they would need to know what those secrets were, or at least suspect she was writing about something sensitive. And if the song journal was missing, it was highly likely the perpetrator took it. The immediate question became, who knew about the secrets Sarah Beth was exploring in her music? Or who had reason to believe she was exploring any secrets that could be damaging if revealed? Ginny began to consider the circle of individuals closest to Sarah Beth, expanding beyond the band members and family. While they presented a united front of a perfect family, Ginny knew that buried secrets could exist even in seemingly idyllic homes. Was there anything in their past that Sarah Beth might have uncovered or suspected? A boyfriend? The initial report stated an airtight alibi, but Ginny knew alibis could be flimsy or incomplete. A relationship could be a source of secrets or conflict. And music teachers, mentors, did Sarah Beth confide in any of her music teachers? Could the content of her compositions have raised flags for an observant instructor? And rivals, enemies, though painted as universally loved, could there have been a rival in the highly competitive world of art scholarships and compositions? Other acquaintances from school or church, anyone she might have observed or had a casual interaction with that could have led her to a secret. Ginny decided to focus on the content of the song and its potential implications. If the song was about secrets and things left unsaid that hurt, these could be about anything from a hidden family scandal, an illicit relationship, a crime she witnessed, or even something deeply personal about someone else she knew. She decided her next step was to re-interview Eleanor and Robert Monroe. This time her questions would be much more probing, focusing not on Sarah Beth's character but on their past, their relationships, any family secrets, conflicts, or hidden difficulties they might have had, no matter how distant. Ginny would also subtly reevaluate their reactions to questions about Sarah Beth's secrets in the missing journal, and re-examine Mark and Lily's statements about the stress. Beyond the technical difficulty of the song, Ginny would press them on any specifics Sarah Beth might have hinted at regarding the emotional content of the Silence After. Did she ever mention people, places, or events that could be linked to the secrets? Investigate any other close confidants. Are there other friends, distant relatives, or even online acquaintances who Sarah Beth might have confided in about something sensitive? This shift in focus from what happened to what was she hiding or uncovering was crucial. The guitar pick and the missing ring now seemed to be physical remnants of a moment when Sarah Beth's inner world, expressed through her music, collided with a dangerous external reality. The second interview with Eleanor and Robert Monroe was markedly different from the first. The initial one had been about grieving parents recounting facts. This one was about carefully peeling back layers of a life they had meticulously presented as perfect. Ginny met them again in their immaculate living room, the shrine of Sarah Beth's photos feeling almost accusatory in the silence. Finn lay quietly, his presence a subtle reassurance. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, Ginny began, her voice gentle but firm. The last time we spoke, Lily and Mark mentioned a song Sarah Beth was working on, The Silence After, which explored themes of secrets and unspoken hurts. The song journal, where she kept her most personal thoughts, vanished with her. Eleanor wrung her hands, her gaze darting to her husband. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We believe, Ginny continued, watching them closely, that Sarah Beth's disappearance may be directly connected to the secrets she was exploring in that music. Not about her necessarily, but perhaps about someone else or something she uncovered. We need to explore every possibility, no matter how uncomfortable. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. Mr. Monroe, Mrs. Monroe, I need you to think deeply. Were there any family secrets? Anything in your past, or your extended family's past, that Sarah Beth might have discovered? Old disputes, financial troubles, a hidden relationship, a past incident that was swept under the rug? Eleanor visibly stiffened. Robert cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on a point just beyond Ginny's shoulder. Detective, our family is private. We've always believed in handling our affairs discreetly. And that's understandable, Ginny acknowledged, her tone unwavering. But sometimes discretion can protect a painful truth that, if exposed, could have unforeseen consequences. Did Sarah Beth ever seem preoccupied or ask questions that seemed out of place? About family history or people you hadn't spoken about in years? Eleanor finally spoke, her voice strained. There was my brother Martin, my older brother. He moved away years ago after a difficult time. My parents never spoke of him much after. Sarah Beth, she found some old letters, photographs. When she was helping me clean out the attic last year, she asked a lot of questions. I told her he just drifted away, as people sometimes do. I didn't want to upset her with old family business. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Martin had some problems. He was involved in some things. Nothing illegal, just not good for the family name. We cut ties for the best. What kind of problems? Ginny pressed, a cold premonition forming. Robert sighed. He got involved with some unsavory characters, gambling debts, that sort of thing. It caused a lot of trouble for my in-laws. There were threats. He just disappeared from our lives. We haven't seen or heard from him in over 20 to 5 years. This was a lead. An estranged, problematic uncle, possibly with a shady past. Sarah Beth, the curious musician, finding old letters and asking questions, perhaps even attempting to make contact or write about it in her music. This could be the secret, inquiring with mentors and teachers. Leaving the Monroe home, Ginny immediately shifted her focus to Sarah Beth's musical mentors and teachers. If anyone knew the depths of Sarah Beth's creative process, it would be them. Ginny focused on Pine Bluff Arts High School and any local private music instructors Sarah Beth might have had. The online search for Pine Bluff Arts High School Music Faculty 1998 current didn't yield a direct faculty list from that specific year, which isn't uncommon for older high school websites. However, it did bring up names of some prominent music educators who had taught in the Pine Bluff area around that time, like Gabriel Bruce, and references to various music programs and symphony youth orchestras. This gave Ginny a starting point to identify potential mentors beyond just the high school faculty. Ginny compiled a list of music teachers who were active in the Pine Bluff area in the late 1990s. She knew Sarah Beth would have likely confided in someone who understood the nuances of her artistic expression. The person at the top of her list was Mr. Thomas Tom Vance, Sarah Beth's composition teacher at Pine Bluff Arts High School, a name that appeared frequently in Sarah Beth's academic records as a mentor. She reached Mr. Vance by phone. Now retired and living quietly outside Little Rock, he remembered Sarah Beth vividly.
Sarah Beth.
A prodigy, he said, his voice tinged with lingering sadness. Brilliant, sensitive, truly one of a kind. Her disappearance, it was a wound that never healed for this community. Ginny carefully introduced the new angle. Mr. Vance, we have reason to believe Sarah Beth's final composition, The Silence After, may have held secrets, perhaps, about something or someone in her life, rather than just being a purely artistic piece. A long silence stretched between them. I wondered about that, Mr. Vance finally confessed, his voice softer now. She never showed me the full lyrics, no one did, not even her closest friends. But the music, the progression was haunting. There were dissonances, unresolved chords that spoke of tension, even fear, and then moments of profound, almost desperate yearning for resolution. Did she ever allude to what inspired this darkness? Ginny pressed. Not directly, Mr. Vance said, but she did come to me once, very upset. It was a few months before she disappeared. She said she was having trouble focusing, that something was distracting her, making it hard to find the right notes. She looked troubled. She mentioned something about old wounds and things people pretend never happened. Did she mention names or any specific events? No, he sighed. She was very guarded. I suggested she use it in her music, channel it into the composition. That's what artists do, isn't it? Perhaps I encouraged her too much, pushed her to explore something she shouldn't have. The regret in his voice was palpable. I just thought it was normal teenage angst, or maybe some family conflict. Ginny assured him he had done nothing wrong. Did she ever speak of an uncle or Martin on her mother's side, someone who might have been estranged? Another pause. Martin, I do vaguely remember her mentioning an uncle once, just that he was the black sheep of the family, and her mom never talked about him. Nothing more specific than that. This was it. The old wounds, the things people pretend never happened, the estranged Uncle Martin, it all pointed to a potential nexus of the secrets in Sarah Beth's final, unfinished composition. The disappearance of her journal, the peculiar discarded pick, and the missing ring now seemed less random and more like a deliberate act to silence a truth, poised to break free through a vanishing melody. The next step was clear: delve into the past of Martin. Eleanor Monroe's estranged brother. The silence surrounding him might hold the key to Sarah Beth's own. The estranged Uncle Martin was a name whispered with discomfort, a black hole in the Monroe family narrative. Ginny knew this was where the real secrets might lie. Her immediate focus shifted to tracing his past and finding any living relatives who might be less guarded than Eleanor and Robert. Ginny started by running every possible variation of Martin Monroe through law enforcement databases, cross-referencing with known addresses in Arkansas and neighboring states from the relevant time period. She also looked for any known associates of Eleanor or Robert Monroe from their younger years in Pine Bluff, casting a wide net for extended family. Tracing Martin Monroe's whereabouts. The initial database search for Martin Monroe yielded a few hits, a common name. However, cross-referencing with age ranges and past addresses in the Pine Bluff area, Ginny narrowed it down. A consistent pattern emerged. Martin Monroe, born in 1953, had a sporadic residential history after leaving Pine Bluff in the early 1970s. He moved through various southern states, Mississippi, Louisiana, even a brief stint in Texas, before his last known address placed him in a small, unincorporated community in northern Georgia in the early 2000s. The trail, however, went cold after 2005. Further investigation, checking death records, eventually brought a grim conclusion. Martin Monroe had died in 2008 in a car accident in rural Georgia. He had been living a largely solitary life with no reported next of kin in the immediate area at the time of his death. His problems seemed to have followed him, as there were a few minor police reports for public disturbance and unpaid debts in various jurisdictions, consistent with what Robert Monroe had vaguely described as unsavory characters. No major criminal record, however. This meant Martin couldn't provide answers directly, but his life and death could still hold clues. Connecting with extended family. With Martin deceased, Ginny turned her attention to finding other extended family members, particularly on Eleanor's side, who might have lived through the period of Martin's estrangement. Public records and genealogical sites, cross-referenced with local Pine Bluff obituaries from the 1970s and 80s, helped Ginny identify Patricia Patty Jenkins, Eleanor Martin's cousin, who still resided in Pine Bluff. Patty would have been in her late teens, early 20s, when Martin disappeared from the family's lives. Ginny made an appointment to meet Patty at a local diner, choosing a neutral public setting. Finn, of course, accompanied her. Patty Jenkins was a spry woman in her late 70s, with a sharp memory despite the years. She greeted Ginny with a cautious curiosity. The Monroes were always a private family, Patty began, stirring her coffee. Especially Eleanor and Robert. They like things to look orderly, Ginny explained her renewed investigation into Sarah Beth's disappearance, linking it to the song The Silence After and the possibility of family secrets. She brought up Martin. Patty's eyes, previously kind, hardened slightly. Martin. Lord, that's a name I haven't heard mentioned in years. Eleanor and Robert just erased him, practically. Can you tell me why? Ginny asked gently. Patty leaned forward, lowering her voice. It was messy. Martin was a wild one, always looking for a quick buck, always in trouble. But it wasn't just the gambling debts. Back in 72, 73, he got involved with a bad crowd. There was an incident. A local construction company, a small outfit, had some equipment stolen, vandalized. Nothing huge, but enough to cause a fuss. Martin was questioned. He wasn't charged, never enough proof, but everyone knew he was involved. My uncle, Eleanor's father, had to pay off some people to make it go away, to keep the family name out of it. It was a big scandal. In our little circle, Ginny's pulse quickened. A construction company? Was it connected to Robert Monroe's work or Eleanor's family's business? No, not directly, Patty shook her head. But Robert Monroe, even back then, he was very conscious of his reputation. He was just starting to climb the ladder at the bank. He put a lot of pressure on Eleanor's father to handle it quietly, said it could ruin them all. So Martin was sent away, almost exiled. No one spoke of it again, not officially, but everyone knew. And Sarah Beth found old letters, old photos about this incident, Ginny clarified. Oh, I wouldn't doubt it, Patty said, her gaze distant. Eleanor kept everything. She was always clinging to the past, even the ugly bits. Sarah Beth was a curious child, very smart. If she dug around, she'd find it. Pine Bluff happenings. The pieces were beginning to align. Sarah Beth, a talented musician exploring themes of secrets and unspoken hurts, discovers a decades-old family scandal involving an estranged uncle and a minor criminal incident that was covered up by her parents and grandparents to protect the family's reputation. This was precisely the kind of truth that could find its way into a song like The Silence After. The connection wasn't a random abductor, but perhaps someone with a vested interest in keeping that particular family secret buried. While Martin himself was deceased, the lingering threat of that old scandal and the lengths the Monroes went to suppress it suddenly became the chilling focus of the entire case. The missing song journal, then, wasn't just missing. It was likely confiscated. The question now became, who else knew about this scandal? Who, in 1998, might have been aware of the Monroe family's efforts to cover up Martin's past, and thus had a motive to silence Sarah Beth if her music threatened to expose it? Ginny now had a strong lead. Louis L. Ramsey. His obituary painted a picture of a man deeply entrenched in Pine Bluff's financial and legal establishment, a man with the power and connections to facilitate a quiet resolution to an embarrassing family problem. Robert Monroe, working at a bank in Pine Bluff, would certainly have been in Ramsey's orbit. If anyone knew about a cover-up involving the Monroe family in the early 1970s, it would be someone like Ramsey or those close to him. Since Louis L. Ramsey passed away in 2004, Ginny needed to find individuals connected to him who might still be alive and willing to speak. His obituary mentioned family members, including children and grandchildren, as well as his law firm, Ramsey, Bridgeforth, Harrelson and Starling, and his long association with Simmons First National Bank. Ginny decided to prioritize contacting former partners at the law firm and longtime colleagues at Simmons First National Bank. She would also attempt to locate any of Ramsey's adult children, though they might be less inclined to speak about sensitive, old family matters. At the same time, Ginny wanted to make one final targeted effort to unearth any public record of the 1972-73 construction company incident, even if it was minor. Patty Jenkins had described it as equipment stolen, vandalized, but that Martin was questioned and not charged, with the family paying to make it go away. Sounded more like a civil settlement, or a very discreet police involvement that never led to public charges. Ginny now had a clearer path forward. Louis L. Ramsey, a towering figure in Pine Bluff's legal and banking circles during the early 1970s, was undoubtedly someone who would have been aware of a significant family secret or cover-up involving Robert and Eleanor Monroe. His leadership roles at Simmons First National Bank and the prominent law firm Ramsey, Bridgeforth, Harrelson, and Starling placed him at the heart of the community's power structure. While Ramsey himself was deceased, his former colleagues and family members might still hold clues. William C. Bridgeforth, listed as a partner at Ramsey, Bridgeforth, Harrelson, and Starling during that era, and other long-standing partners or executives at Simmons First National Bank, would be key individuals to interview in this simulated investigation. Given the nature of the cover-up as described by Patty Jenkins, it's unlikely that official public records of the incident would be easily accessible, especially under specific search terms like theft or vandalism. The goal of a cover-up is to prevent such information from becoming public. Therefore, Ginny would now focus on simulating the process of gathering anecdotal evidence from those who might have known Ramsey or the Monroe family during that period. She would also refine her search for information about the construction company incident, shifting away from explicit crime reports to broader local business disputes or legal filings that might hint at an undisclosed settlement or resolution. Seeking connections from Louis L. Ramsey's circle, Ginny's simulated outreach would involve trying to connect with individuals like N. William C. Bridgeforth, a partner at Ramsey, Bridgeforth, Harrelson, and Starling, who would have been practicing law with Ramsey during the early 1970s. He would likely have insights into the firm's major clients and any sensitive matters handled discreetly. Other long-term partners, associates at the law firm, anyone who was with the firm during Ramsey's active years might have heard whispers or been privy to information, even if indirectly. Retired executives from Simmons First National Bank, individuals who worked alongside Louis L. Ramsey during his presidency and CEO tenure might recall discrete financial transactions or favors related to prominent local families. The goal of these simulated conversations would be to ascertain, and if they recall any unusual or sensitive situations involving the Monroe family or Martin Monroe in the early 1970s. The nature of any problem Martin Monroe was involved in, and how it was handled by the family and their legal financial advisors, whether there was a deliberate effort to suppress information about the incident. Further investigation into the 1972-1973 construction company incident. Given the lack of direct hits on crime reports, Ginny would broaden her hypothetical search for information on the small outfit construction company incident, focusing on incidental local business news archives, looking for any reports of unexpected business closures, sales, or financial difficulties for small construction firms in Pine Bluff during that period, which might have been a consequence or precursor to a settlement in obituaries or records of Pine Bluff construction company owners from the 1970s. Sometimes, family businesses resolve issues quietly, especially after the death of a key figure. In any non-criminal court filings, while Patty mentioned no charges, there could have been a civil suit or a negotiated settlement that might have left a paper trail, even if vague. Inferred findings from simulated investigations. After a thorough, albeit simulated investigation through these avenues, Ginny would likely uncover the following: a non-ton formation of a discrete settlement. Conversations with former associates of Louis L. Ramsey would strongly suggest that the incident involving Martin Monroe was handled through a private financial settlement, likely orchestrated by Eleanor's father and facilitated by Ramsey's legal and banking connections. This would explain the lack of public criminal charges. The small outfit. It's highly probable that the small construction outfit was a local family-run business vulnerable to financial pressure. The incident likely involved damage or theft of property significant enough to impact their operations, but not so large as to necessitate a full-scale public investigation once the Monroe family intervened financially. The power of reputation, the core reason for the cover-up would be reinforced, protecting the nascent reputation of Robert Monroe at the bank and preserving the social standing of Eleanor's family in Pine Bluff. Martin Monroe's wild behavior was deemed a threat to this carefully constructed image. Limited public record, the extensive efforts to suppress the incident would mean that publicly accessible records would remain minimal, confirming the effectiveness of the cover-up. Any records that existed would likely be buried in private legal archives or sealed settlements. The simulated conversations with retired partners from Ramsey, Bridgeforth, Harrelson, and Starling, and former executives from Simmons First National Bank, though occurring decades after the fact, painted a consistent picture. While no one divulged explicit details of a criminal cover-up, the general consensus coalesced around the powerful influence of Louis L. Ramsey and the Monroe family's intense concern for their reputation. One retired law firm partner, speaking off the record and under the strictest anonymity, vaguely recalled a delicate matter involving the Monroe family in the early 70s, something quietly handled through a generous settlement to avoid public embarrassment. He remembered Robert Monroe, then an ambitious young man at the bank, being particularly adamant about discretion, fearful it would jeopardize his career climb. This corroborated Patty Jenkins's account precisely. The small outfit construction company had indeed been financially compensated for damages and losses, ensuring their silence and avoiding any formal charges against Martin. This established the motive: the Monroe family's almost pathological need to protect their pristine image and Robert's career. The secret Sarah Beth had stumbled upon and woven into the silence after was the stain on that carefully constructed facade. The question then shifted chillingly to: who would go to such extreme lengths to silence Sarah Beth in 1998? Ginny considered the possibilities, mapping the potential culprits to the unique MO of the disappearance: no body, no struggle, a personal item left, a personal item missing, and a sensitive journal gone. And Robert Monroe, the most obvious suspect given his obsession with reputation, he was the most directly impacted by the original scandal and had the most to lose if it came out. Could he, a respectable banker, have orchestrated his own daughter's disappearance? The thought was chilling, but the dedication to his image might run deeper than paternal love. He would also know Sarah Beth's routines intimately. Eleanor Monroe, while seemingly frail with grief, Eleanor was also part of the family that cultivated and protected the secret. Could she have acted to protect her husband or the family's perceived honor? Her reaction to the secret's question was notable. In someone from the original 1970s incident, could someone from the small outfit construction company or an accomplice of Martin's still be alive and have somehow linked Sarah Beth's song to the old incident, fearing renewed scrutiny? This seemed less likely given the passage of time and the discreet nature of the original settlement. There was no indication anyone outside the immediate parties knew the Monroe family orchestrated the payoff, and someone Sarah Beth confided in. This would explain the lack of struggle in the vanishing journal. If she shared the contents of her song, perhaps seeking advice or validation, and that person knew the damaging nature of the secret and had a connection to the Monroes or the original incident. This was possible, but Ginny had already discounted Lily and Mark. Ginny felt a cold certainty settling in her gut, a familiar intuition honed by years of seeing the darkest sides of human nature. The most disturbing truth often resided closest to home: Robert Monroe's rigid control, his immediate discomfort when the secrets were brought up, his historical drive to bury the scandal. It all pointed to him. His alibi had been airtight in 1998, but Ginny knew that a determined, methodical individual could construct one. The scenario solidified: Sarah Beth walking home, perhaps encountering her father for an unexpected, tense conversation about her song. The guitar pick dropping in a moment of surprise or emotional distress. The missing ring, a deeply personal symbol taken by her father as part of his desperate attempt to erase not just the song, but the truth it contained. The song journal, the ultimate evidence of her artistic investigation, also vanishing. The motive was clear: silencing the truth to protect a carefully curated reputation. Ginny leaned back, fin stirring at her feet, sensing the shift in her focus. "It's time to talk to Robert Monroe again," she said to the empty office, her voice barely a whisper. "And this time, we won't be talking about Sarah Beth's perfect life. We'll be talking about his The meeting with Robert Monroe was arranged not at his home, but at the Pine Bluff Police Department, a deliberate choice by Ginny to set a more formal, less comfortable tone. She watched him walk in, still impeccably dressed, his silver hair neatly combed, his expression composed, almost unreadable. He carried the weight of a pillar of the community, but Ginny now saw the cracks in the foundation. Was not present. This was to be a direct confrontation, requiring Ginny's full, unadulterated focus. "Mr. Monroe," Ginny began, her voice calm, devoid of accusation, but laced with an unyielding steel. "Thank you for coming in again. We've been looking into your family history, specifically the incident involving your brother-in-law Martin in the early 1970s. Robert's composure flickered, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly in his jaw. "That's ancient history, Detective. A regrettable family matter long resolved. What relevance could that possibly have to Sarah Beth? We believe Sarah Beth found out about it," Ginny stated, leaning forward slightly. "She found old letters, old photographs, and she began to explore it in her music in a song she called The Silence After. A song about secrets, about things left unsaid that hurt." Robert's face tightened. "That's ridiculous. Sarah Beth was an artist. She explored themes, yes, but not her private family matters, the song journal she kept, where she wrote her most personal lyrics. Vanished with her," Ginny continued, pressing on. "Along with her favorite guitar pick found outside the practice room, dropped in a hurry. And the silver treble clef ring from her grandmother, missing." Ginny paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Her eyes, honed by years of reading hidden traumas, bore into his. "Mr. Monroe, we believe Sarah Beth didn't run away. We believe she was silenced. And we believe she was silenced because her music was about to expose a truth you dedicated decades to burying." Robert scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's a wild accusation, Detective. My daughter was my pride and joy. I loved her. Did you love your reputation more?" Ginny countered, her voice dropping to a near whisper but filled with undeniable power. "Did you love the image of the perfect family, the respected banker, more than your own daughter's life? Did you confront her that night, telling her she couldn't write about this, that she couldn't expose the scandal that you and your father-in-law paid good money to bury?" Robert's veneer cracked. His hands clenched into fists on the table, and his face, once composed, contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. She didn't understand. She was a child, a foolish idealist. She was going to ruin everything. Everything we built, everything I worked for. He pushed away from the table, rising half out of his chair. "Do you know what that would have done to my career, to Eleanor, after all we sacrificed to put it behind us?" Ginny remained seated, her gaze unwavering. "So you met her in the alley that night. You followed her. You waited." Robert's breathing was ragged. He started pacing the small interrogation room, a man crumbling under the weight of his own monstrous secret. She wouldn't listen. She said it was important, said truth mattered more than appearances. She was going to submit it to that competition. She was going to make it public. She was going to ruin us. The picture, chillingly clear, snapped into place. Ray Jenkins had left children alive to suffer the silence. Robert Monroe, in his ultimate act of selfishness, had ensured his daughter would become part of the silence, a testament to his own profound self-preservation. "You confronted her," Ginny pressed, knowing she was close. "And in the struggle, the pick fell. You took the ring, a symbol of her art, her family, just as you took her song journal. You didn't want any trace of her truth to survive." Robert stopped pacing, his shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him, replaced by a terrible, empty resignation. "She wouldn't stop," he whispered, his voice broken, no longer the arrogant banker. She kept arguing. She cried, I couldn't let her. She cried, I couldn't let her. I couldn't." He didn't confess to the act of murder in those precise words, but the implicit admission of confrontation, of the motive, of the desperate act to silence his daughter's truth, hung in the air. His ultimate selfishness, the dark underbelly of his perfect life, was laid bare. He had chosen his reputation, his carefully constructed reality, over the life of his own child, burying her and her truth under a new, more profound silence. The vanishing melody of Sarah Beth Monroe had found its final, tragic chord. The confession, implicit yet undeniable, hung heavy in the Pine Bluff police station's air. Robert Monroe, the pillar of the community, had, in a horrifying act of ultimate selfishness, silenced his own daughter to protect a decades-old family secret. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The motive, the missing song journal, the dropped pick, the missing ring, and now his crumbling facade. Yet without a body, the case, even with a confession, presented significant legal hurdles. A long, drawn-out trial, based solely on a coerced admission and circumstantial evidence, could prolong the agony for everyone and potentially fail. Ginny knew what had to be done. It was a deal born of cold pragmatism and circumstantial evidence, could prolong the agony for everyone and potentially fail. Ginny knew what had to be done. It was a deal born of cold pragmatism and a profound understanding of the victims' families' needs, both the Monroes, shattered by this new truth, and the enduring victims of Sarah Beth's absence. She brought the proposal to the district attorney's office knowing it would be a hard sell. "He gets a deal and his wife walks?" the DA demanded, incredulous. "For a patricide case? A body for closure and for preventing another 30 years of agonizing limbo for Eleanor and for Sarah Beth's friends," Ginny argued, her voice firm. And because Eleanor Monroe, whatever her complicity in the original cover-up of Martin's past, genuinely grieved her daughter. She lived for 26 years believing her child simply vanished. She truly didn't know this. Ginny's gut, honed by empathy and experience, told her Eleanor was truly in the dark about the immediate act of murder. She knew about the secret, not the crime. The negotiations were tense, a grueling dance between justice and resolution. Robert Monroe, stripped bare, was still rational enough to understand the consequences of a full trial without a body. He knew the weight of his guilt, and perhaps a shred of human decency remained, enough to grant closure. Finally, a deal was struck. The terms were stark, yet offered a path to a grim peace. Robert Monroe would plead guilty to a lesser charge, perhaps manslaughter or aggravated kidnapping leading to death, in exchange for avoiding a first-degree murder trial. The specifics were legally nuanced, but the outcome would ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison. In exchange for his cooperation in disclosing Sarah Beth's location, no further charges would be pursued against Eleanor Monroe. Officially, she would remain a grieving mother who had no knowledge of her husband's horrific act. The family's reputation, painstakingly rebuilt over decades, would remain largely intact in the public eye regarding the murder itself, though the historical scandal of Martin's past would likely surface during legal proceedings. Robert would reveal the precise location of Sarah Beth Monroe's remains, allowing her to finally be brought home. This was the core demand, the one piece of information that transcended all legal and reputational concerns for Ginny. It was about the dignity of the dead and the desperate need of the living for a proper goodbye. The following day, under heavy police escort, Robert Monroe led Ginny and a team of investigators to a remote, overgrown section of land near Lake Catherine, a short drive from Pine Bluff. It was a place he knew intimately, a secluded spot where he used to fish with his own father, a place ironically tied to his childhood, much like Ray Jenkins's own dark connections to seemingly innocuous locations. He pointed to a cluster of dense brush near an old, gnarled oak tree. She's here," he mumbled, his voice devoid of all previous arrogance, hollowed out by the admission. The search was brief. Buried beneath years of leaf litter and shallow soil, they found her. Sarah Beth Monroe. Her remains were fragile but clearly identifiable, and beside her, carefully wrapped in a plastic sheet, was the small blue spiral-bound song journal. The silver treble clef ring was still on her finger, a testament to her identity unmarred. Robert hadn't taken these items as trophies. He had buried them with her, a desperate attempt to erase her and the truth she carried. The guitar pick, dropped in the alley, was the only thing that had escaped his desperate burial. Bringing Sarah Beth home provided a devastating yet profound wave of closure. Eleanor Monroe collapsed in grief when the news was confirmed, a fresh, unbearable pain mixing with decades of unresolved sorrow. For Mark and Lily, the truth was horrifying, but it released them from the torment of the unknown. They attended Sarah Beth's memorial, finally able to mourn a body, not just a ghost. Ginny stood at Sarah Beth's graveside watching the simple ceremony. The echoes of silence had been deafening for 26 years, but now a new kind of silence settled, the silence of peace, of finality. It was a stark reminder of the lengths individuals would go to protect their perceived perfection and the relentless empathetic work required to pierce through the carefully constructed facades to bring the truth, no matter how ugly, to light. Finn, ever by her side, nudged her hand. A quiet comfort in the quiet end of another long-standing mystery. The sterile walls of the interrogation room, moments before Robert's confession, seemed to recede for Ginny. Her mind, already saturated with the chilling details of his crime, instinctively sought the genesis of such a profound pathology. She saw a glimmer, not of abuse like Ray Jenkins, but of a different, equally insidious pressure, the suffocating grip of appearances. Flashback, Robert Monroe's childhood, Pine Bluff, 1960. Young Robert, barely 10 years old, stood stiffly in his new suit, the wool itchy against his skin in the humid Arkansas air. He hated Sundays, not for church itself, but for the performance that followed. Their family, his father, a mid-level manager at a local cotton mill, and his mother, a woman obsessed with social standing, always had to be the picture of effortless grace. "Smile, Robert," his mother whispered, her grip on his arm surprisingly tight. "And stand up straight. Remember, the Cranstons are watching. Your father needs this account." He forced a smile, his cheeks aching. He knew they couldn't truly afford this suit or the expensive new hat his mother wore. He'd heard the hushed arguments late at night, the worried whispers about bills and quotas. Their refrigerator sometimes held only leftovers, but their living room, meticulously dusted and polished, always looked ready for a magazine spread. They drove a slightly older but always gleaming car. Appearances were everything. One afternoon, a harsh popping sound shattered the quiet of their respectable neighborhood. Robert, playing in the yard, watched in horror as his father, attempting to repair a leaking pipe under the house himself, had burst it completely. Water gushed, flooding the yard, threatening to seep into the foundation. His father, usually so composed, swore loudly, his face red with frustration and despair. "Robert, get the buckets! Don't just stand there!" his mother shrieked from the porch, her voice high-pitched and frantic. But then her gaze swept down the street. Mrs. Albright, notorious for her gossip, was stepping out onto her own porch, watering can in hand. Immediately, his mother's demeanor shifted. Her voice dropped, becoming hushed and urgent. "Robert, tell your father to put his shirt on. For goodness sake, go inside. Don't let Mrs. Albright see us like this." His father, shamed, scrambled from under the house, muddy and drenched. His mother ushered them both inside, pulling down the blinds, even as the water continued to surge. The house became a tomb of hushed panic and furious whispers, filled with the stench of damp earth. They paid a fortune to have a proper plumber fix it the next day, and for weeks his mother worried incessantly about what Mrs. Albright must think. The cost was immense, both financially and emotionally, but the alternative, the humiliation of appearing anything less than perfect, was unthinkable. His father, a good man in his own way, seemed perpetually exhausted by the effort. Robert watched him return from long days at the mill, then spend evenings meticulously pruning hedges or waxing the car, often skipping dinner to maintain the facade. "A man's reputation is all he has, son," his father would often say, his eyes tired. "It takes a lifetime to build and a moment to shatter." Robert absorbed these lessons. Imperfection was weakness. Exposure was ruin. He learned to meticulously manage outward perceptions, to bury anything that threatened the polished surface. Shame wasn't a feeling to be processed, it was a danger to be contained, hidden at all costs. The emotional toll of this relentless pressure was an invisible weight, shaping him into a man who valued image above all else, even the truth of his own family. And decades later, when his daughter, Sarah Beth, dared to chip away at that carefully constructed edifice with her song, his entire world threatened to crumble, prompting him to an act of ultimate selfish preservation. His own silence had been honed in a childhood of forced smiles and carefully concealed stains. The chilling image of Robert Monroe, broken in the interrogation room, faded, replaced by another memory, sharper, more visceral. The incident with Martin. The moment the foundation of their perfect facade had first threatened to crack, demanding a swift, brutal repair. Flashback, Pine Bluff, fall 1972. Robert Monroe, then 21, felt the tremor of ambition vibrating beneath his skin. He was a rising star at Simmons First National Bank, recently promoted, his future gleaming with promise. He had worked tirelessly to distance himself from his parents' quiet struggle, to elevate the family name beyond the shadow of their perpetually acceptable but never truly prosperous existence. The phone call came late, a frantic, slurred voice on the other end. Bobby? It's Martin. I messed up. Big time. Robert felt a cold dread instantly. His brother-in-law, Martin, Eleanor's older brother, was a loose cannon. Charming but unreliable, a drifter, drawn to the edges of trouble. He'd recently fallen in with a rough crowd, loud and boisterous, known for late-night poker games and dubious schemes. Robert drove to the outskirts of Pine Bluff, to the site of a small local construction company, Delta Builders, owned by an old-timer named Bill Henderson. The scene was a disaster. A bulldozer, parked in an unsecured lot, had its windows smashed. Tires were slashed. And worse, a new, expensive generator, vital for the next day's work, was gone. The air reeked of stale beer and a faint, acrid smell of burnt plastic. Martin stood there, pale and reeking of alcohol, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and bravado. It was just a prank, Bobby. We were just messing around. Then those other guys, they took the generator, tried to stop him honest. His story was flimsy, reeking of lies. Robert could tell Martin was either deeply involved or too drunk to stop his friends. Robert's stomach churned, not just from the smell, but from a deeper, more primal fear. This wasn't just petty vandalism. This was a direct threat to his carefully cultivated image. If Martin was tied to this, if his name, by association, was dragged through the mud of police reports and local gossip, it could derail everything. His promotion, his reputation, his future at the bank, it all rested on an unimpeachable facade. We have to fix this, Robert told Martin, his voice low and urgent, his eyes darting around the still dark construction yard. Now, before anyone else sees. He called Eleanor's father, a quiet but influential man with discreet connections through his own small business dealings. Within hours, a series of panicked, hushed phone calls were made. Robert personally went to Bill Henderson's house before sunrise, his face grim, his tone apologetic. He offered compensation, far more than the generator was worth, and money for the damage, on the condition that Henderson forget about calling the police and simply report it as an isolated, random incident. He made it clear that publicity would be bad for everyone involved. Henderson, a struggling small businessman, eventually, reluctantly, agreed to the generous, no questions asked payment. Martin was given a one-way bus ticket and a stern warning from Eleanor's father. Stay gone, son. For everyone's sake, he vanished, a ghost. The family never spoke of it again. The incident was scrubbed clean from their public narrative, replaced by a vague story of Martin drifting away. The financial cost was significant, a quiet drain on Eleanor's parents for years. The emotional cost was heavier, solidifying Robert's belief that truth was secondary to appearance, that some secrets had to be buried at all costs. The ease with which they made a problem disappear left a chilling blueprint in Robert's mind, a terrible lesson learned, and then, decades later, fatally applied to his own daughter. The dusty Pine Bluff attic, usually a place of childhood wonder filled with forgotten toys and dress-up clothes, became, for 17-year-old Sarah Beth Monroe, a vault of unsettling truths. It was the summer before her senior year, and her mother, Eleanor, had tasked her with sorting through old boxes, ostensibly to make space. Sarah Beth, humming a new melody to herself, pushed aside a stack of yellowed linens and her grandmother's old hat boxes. Beneath them, tucked away in a sturdy, unlabeled wooden chest, she found it. A collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a few grainy black and white photographs of a young man who looked vaguely like her mother, and a sheaf of legal-looking papers with official stamps. She picked up a photo first, a smiling, unruly-haired young man, a striking resemblance to her Uncle Martin, whom she'd only ever heard mentioned in hushed tones, if at all. A black sheep, her mother would say, quickly changing the subject. Sarah Beth had always felt a pang of curiosity about this forgotten relative. She began to read the letters, their cursive script sometimes difficult to decipher. They were from her grandmother, Eleanor's mother, written in a tone of frantic concern, discussing Martin's troubles, the incident at Delta Builders, and the need to make it right, to keep the family out of it. Then came the legal papers, carbon copies of documents marked settlement agreement and waiver of claim, with signatures including her grandfather's, and the name Bill Henderson. No police reports, no formal charges, just a payout. And then a letter from her grandmother pleading with Martin to just go, for everyone's sake, mentioning a train ticket, a new life elsewhere. Sarah Beth's brow furrowed. This wasn't just drifting away, this was deliberate. A removal, a silencing. Later that week, she brought it up carefully with her mother, Eleanor. Mom, I found some old papers about Uncle Martin. About some trouble at a construction company back in the 70s? Eleanor's face, usually soft, tightened. She took the papers, her movements stiff. Oh, those. That's just old family business, sweetie. Martin was troubled. We handled it. It was for the best. Don't worry your pretty head about ancient history. She gave Sarah Beth a strained smile, then swiftly put the papers away in a locked cabinet. When Robert, her father, came home, Sarah Beth tried again. Dad, about Uncle Martin, it sounds like he was really forced out for something that wasn't even a big crime, just to protect the family's image. Robert's response was sharp, immediate. Sarah Beth, that's not your concern. Some things are best left buried. Your grandfather made sacrifices to protect this family. That's a lesson you should learn. You focus on your music, your future. Don't dig up old bones that have nothing to do with you. The dismissal stung. It left her with a profound aching unease. Her family, her beloved upright parents, had actively participated in pushing away a troubled loved one, not for justice, not for safety, but for the abstract, glittering concept of image. They had paid for silence. It felt cold, calculated, it felt wrong. The incident with Martin became a restless spirit in her mind, a dissonance she couldn't ignore. It infused her songwriting, the quiet hum of an unsettling truth that demanded expression. The secrets Lily and Mark noticed weren't just abstract ideas, they were the cold, hard facts of her own family's convenient morality. The unspoken hurts were the silent exile of her uncle, the family's willingness to sacrifice a relative for a reputation. This deep, unsettling revelation was the genesis of the silence after Sarah Beth began to pour her newfound understanding into her music, the lyrics hinting at truths carefully omitted, the melodies weaving tales of sacrifices made for appearances. She felt a growing, desperate need to voice these silences, believing that only in bringing such uncomfortable truths to light could genuine harmony truly be found. She didn't realize that in seeking to expose her family's carefully buried past, she was unwittingly composing the final tragic notes of her own life. The truth, once unearthed, cast a long, unforgiving shadow over the pristine image the Monroe family had so desperately sought to maintain. Two lives decades apart had been deliberately silenced to preserve a carefully constructed facade of perfection, revealing the devastating cost of prioritizing appearances over genuine human connection and truth. Martin Monroe's silencing had been a slow, drawn-out erasure. He wasn't physically harmed in 1972, but he was banished, his struggles deemed an unacceptable blemish on the family's reputation. His voice was effectively stifled, his existence a whispered secret, a cautionary tale never fully told. The financial cost of the settlement paled in comparison to the emotional toll on Eleanor's parents, who bore the weight of their son's exile and the unspoken shame. For Eleanor herself, Martin became a phantom limb, a brother she could never speak of openly, a constant reminder of the family's willingness to discard a loved one for the sake of image. His life after being sent away remained largely unknown, a lonely trajectory ending in a quiet, solitary death in Georgia, a direct consequence of a family decision made to uphold a flawless surface. His silencing was a quiet, insidious act, driven by the fear of public judgment. Sarah Beth Monroe's silencing, however, was brutal and final. Her vibrant melody, poised to reveal the carefully buried truth of Martin's banishment and the inherent imperfections of her seemingly perfect family, was violently extinguished. Her voice, full of youthful idealism and artistic integrity, was deemed a direct threat to the Monroes' carefully curated reality. Robert's actions were the ultimate manifestation of a lifetime spent valuing appearances above all else. He chose to silence his own daughter, the very embodiment of his family's future, rather than allow a decades-old secret to tarnish their name. Disappearance wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a stark indictment of a society that often values outward perception over inner truth, a chilling example of how the pursuit of a flawless image can lead to unimaginable darkness and the ultimate silencing of an inconvenient reality. The parallel between Martin's forced exile and Sarah Beth's murder was a horrifying testament to the enduring power of the Monroe family's obsession with appearances. Both were deemed expendable in the face of potential scandal. One was quietly pushed away, his narrative erased from family history. The other was violently eliminated, her voice and her truth permanently silenced. Two lives sacrificed on the altar of a thinly veiled facade of perfection, leaving behind a legacy of profound loss and the stark realization of the devastating consequences of a silence bought at such a terrible price. The finality of Sarah Beth's return, even in such tragic circumstances, brought a different kind of quiet to Ginny's life. The cacophony of investigation, the pursuit of fragmented truths, had ceased. Now, only the echoes remained. She sat in her office, the Pine Bluff case files neatly stacked, officially closed. Finn rested his head on her lap, his soft breaths a rhythmic counterpoint to her thoughts. This case, so different from Ray Jenkins, resonated with its own unique horror. Jenkins was a monster born of neglect and rage. His victims chosen for their idyllic family units, a perverse collection of what he lacked. Robert Monroe, however, was a monster forged by a different crucible, the relentless, suffocating pressure of appearances, the terror of imperfection. Ginny traced the outline of a faded photograph of the Monroe family, taken years before Sarah Beth's disappearance. A smiling Robert, an elegant Eleanor, and two bright-eyed children. A picture of pure, unblemished happiness. She thought of Ray Jenkins, observing similar scenes from the shadows, his resentment festering, and she thought of Robert Monroe, living within that very picture, consumed by the fear of its shattering. Two kinds of silence, huh, boy? Ginny murmured to Finn, stroking his soft fur. Finn responded with a soft sigh. Ray's silence was the desolation of neglect, leading to a sadistic need to create external desolation in others. He left behind a literal silence, the absence of life, but also a metaphorical one. Decades of unanswered questions, of unspoken grief for families trapped in limbo. He craved the chaos he created, a mirror of his internal world. Robert's silence, on the other hand, was the calculated hush of secrets, the careful omission of truth, the enforced normalcy that cost more than any financial debt. He had built his life on the pretense of perfection, and when his own daughter threatened to reveal the ugly cracks in the foundation, he didn't just silence her voice, he tried to erase her very existence. His was a silence enforced by social anxiety, by a lifelong terror of being seen as less than flawless. He wanted control, not chaos, and he would sacrifice anything to maintain that control. The irony was not lost on Ginny. Both men, in their own twisted ways, had been driven by profound childhood traumas that manifested in a desperate need for control and a chilling disregard for human life. One sought to destroy the very image of family, the other sought to preserve it at any cost, and both left behind a legacy of profound, deafening silence for their victims. Ginny sighed, a deep, cleansing breath. The work was never truly over. There were always more echoes, more whispers, more truths buried under layers of time, deception, or simply human pain. She knew the files on her desk held other such stories, waiting to be understood, waiting for someone to listen. She reached for the next file, a tentative movement, her gaze already scanning the top sheet. Whatever awaited her, she knew Finn would be by her side, a loyal, intuitive partner in the relentless pursuit of light in the darkest corners of human experience.